First Contact and Ultimatum. The pride of human expansion, Novaris, hung like a jewel against the velvet backdrop of space. Its sprawling metropolises and agricultural territories were visible even from high orbit, testament to humanity's relentless drive to spread beyond their ancestral home. Established only 30 years ago, Novaris had already become a critical hub for humanity's interstellar commerce and scientific advancement, home to nearly 12 million colonists and the headquarters of the Terran Scientific Cooperative. Fleet Commander Elandra Voss stood at the panoramic viewport of Novaris Command, her weathered face reflecting the artificial lights of the command center behind her. At 53, Voss had served in the Terran Defense Force for over 3 decades, but nothing in her extensive experience had prepared her for what appeared in the system that morning. "Status report," she demanded, not turning from the viewport. 117 vessels, Commander, replied Strategic Officer Chen Wei, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Configuration unknown, but energy signatures suggest significant weapons capability. They've taken position just beyond our defense grid perimeter. And communications. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Universal Translator is processing now. The main holographic display flickered to life, revealing a towering figure that sent an involuntary shiver down Voss's spine. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, the alien's exoskeletal body gleamed under the lights of what appeared to be a command bridge. 6 limbs arranged asymmetrically around its torso ended in manipulators that looked disturbingly like surgical instruments. Its face, if it could be called that, consisted of compound eyes and vibrating mandibles that clicked rhythmically as it spoke. "Humans of Novaris," the translator rendered in a flat, synthetic voice. "I am Supreme Warmaster Hosrek of the Krentari Dominion. Your expansion into this sector has been noted and deemed unacceptable. This system lies within territory claimed by the Dominion." Voss straightened her uniform and stepped forward. "This is Fleet Commander Elandra Voss of the Terran Defense Force. Novaris is a recognized colony of the Terran Confederation, established in unclaimed space according to all interstellar protocols. We have no record of any prior Krentari claim." The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly. Amusement, perhaps. "Prior notification is a courtesy extended to equals, Commander. Humanity's status does not warrant such consideration. You have 2 of your planetary rotations to evacuate all military personnel and surrender control of this world to the Dominion. Civilian infrastructure may remain, and your colonists may stay as productive subjects under Krentari administration. And if we refuse, then we will take this world by force and make an example of your species' arrogance." The alien's compound eyes seemed to glitter. "The Krentari have subjugated 16 civilizations more advanced than yours, Commander. Your primitive defenses cannot stand against us." Voss's expression remained impassive. "You're making assumptions about our capabilities, Warmaster. We have studied your technology thoroughly, human. Your vessels use ion propulsion. Your weapons are based on plasma discharge technology. Your defensive systems rely on magnetic field generation. All painfully outdated." "I see." Voss nodded slowly. "And I assume you've made your decision final. It is the will of the Dominion. Then I'll be equally clear, Warmaster. Novaris will not surrender. Not today, not in 2 days, not ever. If you want this world, you'll have to take it." Khazrek's mandibles stilled. "You choose war, then." "No," Voss replied, her voice suddenly cold as interstellar space. "You chose war when you entered our system with weapons primed. We're simply accepting your invitation." The transmission cut, and Voss turned to her command staff. Their faces reflected a mixture of fear and determination. Appropriate, given the circumstances. "Commence Operation Firewall," she ordered. "And contact Earth. Tell them we have first contact scenario 7. The fleet is outnumbered nearly 4 to 1. Strategic Officer Chen reminded her. Voss's smile contained no warmth. "Then it's a good thing we won't be fighting fair." When the Krentari attack came 12 hours later, it followed precisely the tactical doctrine their species had perfected over centuries of conquest. The alien armada formed into a precise geometric formation, maximizing overlapping fields of fire while protecting vital command vessels. Their approach was deliberate, methodical, and utterly predictable to anyone who had studied historical patterns of warfare. From Novaris, the defense seemed pitiful in comparison. A mere 32 ships moved to intercept, arranging themselves in what appeared to be a desperate defensive screen before the planet. Aboard his flagship, Supreme Warmaster Khazrek observed the human formation with what passed for contempt in his species. They positioned themselves to sacrifice their fleet to buy time for evacuation. He noted to his second, Vexthal, admirable, but futile. "Shall we open communications again?" Vexthal inquired, perhaps seeing our formation will encourage their surrender. "No, they have made their choice. Standard conquest protocol. Begin the primary barrage." The Krentari weapons discharged in perfect synchronization, a wall of destructive energy hurtling toward the human vessels. The smaller ships could not possibly withstand such firepower, except they didn't try to. Seconds before impact, the human fleet seemed to simply vanish. The barrage passed harmlessly through empty space, continuing on its trajectory far beyond its intended targets. Alarms screamed across the Krentari command bridge. "Sensor malfunction," cried the detection officer. "The human vessels have disappeared from all scanning systems." "Impossible," Khazrek snarled. "Check for cloaking technology or—" His order was cut short as the deck beneath him shuddered violently. Throughout the perfectly arranged Krentari formation, explosions began to blossom as if from nowhere. "We are under attack." Vexthal shouted unnecessarily. "Multiple impacts on our outer vessels." The sensor displays flickered, suddenly showing the human ships directly among the Krentari formation, somehow having bypassed the outer defensive screen entirely. They moved with impossible agility, their weapons firing not at the armored hulls of the Krentari vessels, but at seemingly arbitrary points that, nevertheless, resulted in catastrophic system failures throughout the alien ships. "This cannot be," Khazrek hissed. "Their technology is primitive. They use ion drives and plasma weapons." The tactical officer's voice trembled. "Warmaster, we're detecting quantum field disruptions around their vessels. They appear to be using some form of localized space-time manipulation for both propulsion and weapons delivery." "Impossible. Our intelligence indicated." "Our intelligence was wrong," Vexthal interrupted, breaking protocol in his desperation. "They let us see what they wanted us to see." On the main display, another Krentari vessel erupted in flames as precision strikes bypassed its shields entirely, somehow inserting explosives directly into its propulsion systems. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The humans weren't even targeting crew compartments. They were systematically disabling the Krentari vessels with surgical precision, leaving them adrift but intact. "All vessels, defensive formation Omega," Khazrek commanded. "Prepare for—" A holographic projection materialized on the command bridge. Fleet Commander Voss, her expression as impassive as during their first encounter. "Supreme Warmaster Khazrek," she said calmly, "you have lost 23 vessels in the past 6 minutes. None of your ships have managed to inflict so much as a scratch on our fleet. I'm offering you a chance to withdraw what remains of your armada." Khazrek's mandibles clicked furiously. "What trickery is this? You concealed your true technological capabilities." "Of course we did," Voss replied, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Humanity has faced extinction multiple times in our history, from others and from ourselves. We learned long ago that survival sometimes means keeping your best weapons hidden until absolutely necessary." Another tremor rocked the flagship as if to punctuate her statement. "We studied your conquest patterns, Warmaster. 16 civilizations, you said. We noticed they all had something in common. They advertised their capabilities. They sought to intimidate through displays of technological prowess." Her eyes narrowed. Humanity chose a different path. We show the bare minimum and prepare for the worst. This changes nothing. Kozrek managed, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. The Dominion will send more ships. We will. You won't live to see it if you don't order an immediate withdrawal, Voss interrupted. You have 5 minutes to begin retreating from this system. After that, we stop disabling ships and start destroying them, starting with your flagship. The transmission cut, leaving Kozrek staring at the tactical display where more of his vessels were going dark by the second. Your orders, War Master, Vexthal asked quietly. For the first time in his long military career, Supreme War Master Kozrek of the Krentari Dominion gave the order to retreat. The price of underestimation. The surviving Krentari vessels limped to the edge of the Novaris system, their perfect formation now a scattered, chaotic retreat. Of the initial 117 ships, barely 70 remained operational, and even those suffered various degrees of damage. Supreme War Master Kozrek's flagship, once the proud symbol of Dominion military might, now drifted with only auxiliary power systems functioning. In the emergency command center, the primary bridge having been surgically disabled by a human strike team that had somehow materialized directly aboard despite all defenses, Kozrek gathered his surviving officers. How? He demanded, his normally imposing frame now hunched in what the Krentari rarely displayed. Uncertainty. How did they penetrate our defenses so completely? Chief Science Officer Mazvoth, whose expertise in xenotechnology had previously earned him high standing in the Dominion's conquest planning, spoke hesitantly. The humans appeared to have developed practical applications of theoretical physics that our own scientists considered impossible. Their vessels don't move through space in the conventional sense. They manipulate the fabric of space-time itself. In simpler terms, Science Officer, Kozrek growled, they don't need to cross the distance between points. They simply relocate themselves and their weapons. Our shields and hulls are irrelevant because the humans aren't trying to penetrate them. They're bypassing them entirely. Vexthal, whose left manipulator had been severed during one of the human strikes, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Their historical records showed nothing of this technology. Their civilian vessels still use conventional propulsion. A deliberate deception, Mazvoth concluded. I've been analyzing what data we could salvage. It appears the humans have maintained 2 parallel technological tracks for generations. One public, one secret. The public technology advances at an expected rate for a young spacefaring species and is what they allow others to observe. And the secret track, Kozrek prompted, is at least 3 centuries more advanced than what they display, perhaps more. Silence fell over the emergency command center as the implications settled on the gathered officers. The Krentari Dominion had built its power on the precise evaluation of other civilizations' capabilities and the application of overwhelming force against known defenses. Never in their expansionist history had they encountered a species that deliberately understated its military technology to such a degree. We must return to the Dominion, Kozrek finally declared. The High Council must be informed of this threat. The humans are hailing us again, the communications officer announced. The holographic display flickered to life once more, but this time it wasn't Fleet Commander Voss who appeared. Instead, a human male in a simple gray uniform stood before them, his appearance unremarkable save for the intensity in his eyes. Supreme War Master Kozrek, the human began without preamble. I am Admiral Victor Quintus, commanding officer of the Terran Confederation's 7th Fleet. Kozrek straightened as much as his injuries would allow. Another deception. There was no fleet in this system when we arrived. There wasn't, Quintus acknowledged. Now there is. Your attack on Novaris triggered several automated defense protocols. The 7th Fleet was diverted from its previous assignment and arrived while you were occupied with Commander Voss's token force. The sensor officer confirmed this with a trembling voice. War Master, we're detecting 87 new vessels entering the system. Their configuration matches the ones that attacked us, but they're larger. On the display, Admiral Quintus's expression remained neutral. You're currently attempting to retreat to the Dominion to report what you've learned about our capabilities. We cannot allow that. You gave your word that we could withdraw, Kuzrek protested. Commander Voss gave her word that you could withdraw from the Novarus system, Quintus corrected. You've done so. But you won't be leaving this sector. Then you intend to destroy us after all. It wasn't a question. No, we intend to educate you. The Admiral's tone hardened imperceptibly. Humanity has a long and bloody history, War Master. We've spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare against ourselves. When we finally achieved unity and looked to the stars, we made a collective decision. Never again would we allow an existential threat to emerge. Never again would we be caught unprepared. The tactical display updated, showing the human reinforcements surrounding the remaining Krenturi vessels in a three-dimensional enclosure that offered no avenue of escape. Your species has conquered 16 others, you said. Quintus continued. All of them presumably shared certain tactical and ethical assumptions with the Krenturi. They fought according to recognizable patterns, with technologies that developed along predictable paths. And humans do not, Kuzrek concluded bitterly. We cannot afford to. Our history is too violent, our potential for self-destruction too great. We survived ourselves, War Master. That makes us uniquely dangerous in ways you're only beginning to understand. The Admiral stepped closer to the projection, his figure seeming to loom larger despite his average human stature. Here are your options. You and your crew will be taken into custody. Your vessels will be studied by our engineers. Your technology, while primitive compared to our military capabilities, may have applications we haven't considered. And the Dominion? Kuzrek asked, already knowing the answer. We'll receive one survivor from this fleet, carrying detailed records of everything that transpired here. The High Council will learn exactly what happens when someone declares war on humanity. You would make an example of us. Admiral Quintus smiled thinly. We learned that tactic from species like yours, War Master. The difference is, we don't need to destroy worlds to make our point. The knowledge of what we could do is far more effective than actually doing it. Kuzrek's compound eyes studied the human carefully. And if the Dominion chooses to respond with greater force, then the Terran Confederation will consider it a formal declaration of war, and we will respond accordingly. The Admiral's voice remained calm, almost regretful. For your species' sake, I hope your leaders are wiser than you were. Humanity doesn't want conquest or subjugation. We simply want to be left alone to pursue our destiny among the stars. And if we're not left alone, Kuzrek couldn't help but ask. Then we will remind the galaxy why. Throughout our bloody history, the most dangerous words ever spoken were, "Now you've made the humans angry." The holographic projection dissolved, leaving the Krenturi officers staring at empty space where the human had stood. Outside their viewports, the human vessels maintained their perfect enclosure, weapons silent, but unmistakably ready. In that moment, Supreme War Master, Kuzrek understood with perfect clarity the mistake the Dominion had made. They had evaluated humanity as a young, technically inferior species ripe for conquest. They had seen the public face of human technology, the deliberately understated capabilities, the seemingly conventional weaponry, the apparent vulnerability. What they hadn't seen, what they couldn't have known, was that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their hidden technology or their unpredictable tactics. It was their history. A species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times didn't survive by accident. It survived by becoming something terrible and wonderful at once, a civilization that understood the full horror of war because they had perfected it against themselves for millennia. Your orders, War Master, Vexthal asked, breaking the heavy silence. Kuzrek turned from the viewport. His usual commanding presence diminished, but his decision made with the clarity of one who sees an unavoidable truth. Signal our surrender, he said quietly, and pray to whatever forces govern this universe that the Dominion heeds the warning we've paid for with our defeat. As the Krentari vessels powered down their remaining systems in compliance with the human demands, a single message was transmitted from Kozrek's flagship to the Dominion's Central Command, a message that would forever change the Krentari understanding of their place in the galactic order. We chose war against humanity. Humanity showed us what true war means. Do not repeat our mistake.